The Gulag Archipelago, Volume 1. By Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn. Pages 164 to 168. The day after my arrest, my march of penance began. The most recent catch was always sent from the Army Counterintelligence Center to the counterintelligence headquarters of the front. They herded us on foot from Osterode to Brodnica. When they led me out of the punishment cell, there were already 7 prisoners there in 3.5 pairs standing with their backs to me. 6 of them had on well-worn Russian army overcoats which had been around for a long time, and on their backs had been painted, in indelible white paint, SU, meaning Soviet Union. I already knew that mark, having seen it more than once on the backs of our Russian pals as they wandered sadly and guiltily toward the army that was approaching to free them. They had been freed, but there was no shared happiness in that liberation. Their compatriots glowered at them even more grimly than at the Germans. And as soon as they crossed the front lines, they were arrested and imprisoned. The 7th prisoner was a German civilian in a black 3-piece suit, a black overcoat, and black hat. He was over 50, tall, well-groomed, and his white face had been nurtured on gentleman's food. I completed the 4th pair, and the Tatar sergeant, chief of the convoy, gestured to me to pick up my sealed suitcase, which stood off to one side. It contained my officer's equipment as well as all the papers which had been seized as evidence when I was arrested. What did he mean, carry my suitcase? He, a sergeant, wanted me, an officer, to pick up my suitcase and carry it? A large, heavy object? Despite the new regulations? While beside me 6 men from the ranks would be marching empty-handed? And 1 representative of a conquered nation? I did not express this whole complex set of ideas to the sergeant. I merely said, I am an officer. Let the German carry it. None of the prisoners turned around at my words. Turning around was forbidden. Only my mate in the 4th pair, also an SU, looked at me in astonishment. When he had been captured, our army wasn't yet like that. But the sergeant from counterintelligence was not surprised. Even though I was not, of course, an officer in his eyes, still his underscore indoctrination and mine coincided. He summoned the innocent German and ordered him to carry the suitcase. It was just as well the latter had not understood our conversation. The rest of us put our hands behind our backs. The former POWs did not have even 1 bag among them. They had left the motherland with empty hands, and that is exactly how they returned to her. So our column marched off, 4 pairs in file. We did not converse with our convoy. And it was absolutely forbidden to talk among ourselves whether on the march, during a halt, or at overnight stops. As accused prisoners we were required to move as though separated by invisible partitions, as though suffocated, each in his own solitary confinement cell. The early spring weather was changeable. At times a thin mist hung in the air, and even on the firm highway the liquid mud squelched dismally beneath our boots. At times the heavens cleared and the soft yellow sun, still uncertain of its talent, warmed the already thawing hillocks and showed us with perfect clarity the world we were about to leave. At times a hostile squall flew to the attack and tore from the black clouds a snow that was not really even white, which beat icily on faces and backs and feet, soaking through our overcoats and our footcloths. 6 backs ahead of me, 6 constant backs. There was more than enough time to examine and re-examine the crooked, hideous brand's SU and the shiny black cloth on the German's back. There was more than enough time to reconsider my former life and to comprehend my present one. But I couldn't. I had been smashed on the head with an oak club, but I still didn't comprehend. 6 backs. There was neither approval nor condemnation in their swing. The German soon tired. He shied the suitcase from hand to hand, grabbed at his heart, made signs to the convoy that he couldn't carry it any further. At that point his neighbor in the pair, a POW who only a little while before had experienced God knows what in German captivity, but, perhaps, mercy too, took the suitcase of his own free will and carried it. After that the other POWs carried it in turn, also without being ordered to, and then the German again. All but me. And no one said a word to me. At one point we met a long string of empty carts. The drivers studied us with interest, and some of them jumped up to full height on top of the carts and stared. I understood very quickly that their stares and their malice were directed toward me. I was very sharply set off from the others. My coat was new, long, and cut to fit my figure snugly. My tabs had not yet been torn off, and in the filtered sunlight my buttons, also not cut off, burned with the glitter of cheap gold. It was easy to see I was an officer, with a look of newness, too, and newly taken into custody. Perhaps this very fall from the heights stimulated them and gave them pleasure, suggesting some gleam of justice, but more likely they could not get it into their heads, stuffed with political indoctrination, that one of their own company commanders could be arrested in this way, and they all decided unanimously I had come from the other side. Aha, the Vlasov bastard got caught, did he? Shoot the rat! They were vehement in their rear-line wrath. The most intense patriotism always flourishes in the rear, and they added a good deal more in mother oaths. They regarded me as some kind of international operator who had, nonetheless, been caught, and as a result the advance at the front would move along faster and the war would come to an end sooner. How was I to answer them? I was forbidden to utter a single word, and I would have had to explain my entire life to each and every one of them. What could I do to make them understand that I was not a spy, a saboteur? That I was their friend? That it was because of them that I was here? I smiled. Looking up at them, I smiled at them from a column of prisoners under escort. But my bared teeth seemed to them the worst kind of mockery, and they shook their fists and bellowed insults at me even more violently than before. I smiled in pride that I had been arrested not for stealing, nor treason, nor desertion, but because I had discovered through my power of reasoning the evil secrets of Stalin. I smiled at the thought that I wanted, and might still be able, to effect some small remedies and changes in our Russian way of life. But all that time my suitcase was being carried by others. And I didn't even feel remorseful about it. And if my neighbor, whose sunken cheeks were already covered with a soft 2-week growth of beard and whose eyes were filled to overflowing with suffering and knowledge, had then and there reproached me in the clearest of clear Russian words for having disgraced the honor of a prisoner by appealing to the convoy for help and had accused me of haughtiness, of setting myself above the rest of them, I would not have understood him. I simply would not have understood what he was talking about. I was an officer. And if 7 of us had to die on the way, and the 8th could have been saved by the convoy, what was to keep me from crying out, "Sergeant! Save me! I am an officer!" And that's what an officer is even when his shoulder boards aren't blue. And if they are blue? If he has been indoctrinated to believe that even among other officers he is the salt of the earth? And that he knows more than others and is entrusted with more responsibility than others, and that, consequently, it is his duty to force a prisoner's head between his legs, and then to shove him like that into a pipe. Why shouldn't he? I credited myself with unselfish dedication. But meanwhile I had been thoroughly prepared to be an executioner. And if I had gotten into an NKVD school under Yezhov, maybe I would have matured just in time for Beria. So let the reader who expects this book to be a political exposé slam its covers shut right now. If only it were all so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? During the life of any heart this line keeps changing place. Sometimes it is squeezed one way by exuberant evil and sometimes it shifts to allow enough space for good to flourish. One and the same human being is, at various ages, under various circumstances, a totally different human being. At times he is close to being a devil, at times to sainthood. But his name doesn't change, and to that name we ascribe the whole lot, good and evil. Socrates taught us, know thyself. Confronted by the pit into which we are about to toss those who have done us harm, we halt, stricken dumb. It is after all only because of the way things worked out that they were the executioners and we weren't.